We good to go. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to this event, which is happening here live at COP26 in Glasgow. My name is Nanki Kaur, and I will be your moderator for this event. So this event is a hybrid event on elevating adaptation action in the mountains, ranging from the great summits of the Andes to the Alps, the Carpathians, to the Hindu Kush Himalayas. So if any of you have been here for the entire day, we've had a focus on the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, and this is an event which takes us beyond the Hindu Kush Himalayas to talk about climate adaptation and cooperation across the mountain ranges. So welcome once again. This event is being hosted by the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD, the Federal Ministry for Climate Action, Austria, the Alpine Convention, the Carpathian Convention, and the United Nations Environment Programme. And it is supported by the Adaptation at Altitude Programme, funded by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. This event brings together mountain regions to learn from each other. So for those of you who are joining, this is a hybrid setting. Amongst us, there are some of us here in Glasgow at COP26. We'll also be joined by colleagues who will be participating virtually. This event is also being live streamed, and that's with our colleagues sitting there at the back by Heidi and Nick. Thank you for the excellent work that you've been doing. The session is designed for about an hour and a half. And today we will talk about ways to integrate climate action, adaptation action into national policies and regional governance mechanisms. We are going to talk about ways to address transboundary climate risks that we face in the mountain regions. And then finally, we'll be joined by young people who will talk about how the youth can really drive action and adaptation in the mountains. So that's just a summary of what we'll be doing today. And I am honored to welcome high-level speakers, experts, youth representatives from across the mountains world, discussing the importance of climate change adaptation action around the world's summits. For those of you who are new to this region, mountains cover 27% of the world's land surface and support livelihoods of billions of people. They are also especially affected by the climate crisis. Example, through land degradation, increasing natural hazard risk, erosion, drought, glacier loss, and changing water availability. So without further ado, I'd like to invite, I want to start off the first segment of this, which is about setting the context. And I'd like to invite Nicholas Hagelbury, the Senior Program Officer and Climate Change Program Coordinator with the United Nations Environment Programme. Nicholas, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Anki. It's a great pleasure being here, and we're very happy to host this event together with ICIMOD, the government of Austria, and the Alpine Convention. While all ecosystems are obviously very important, some of them, they do stand out. And obviously the mountain areas do stand out. And not only for their majestic beauty, but also for that they account for 1/3 of the key biodiversity areas on land. And they're obviously key areas for our freshwater sources. In terms of climate change, we are now at a place where pretty much around the world we can all see what's happening. And there's no more clear places than in the cryosphere and in the mountains where we see changes in the glaciers, we see changes in the temperatures, we can experience already landslides, avalanches, and so forth. It's not something that is new to these areas, but it's just the intensity and the frequency that is changing. The good news with the solutions that we have, especially when we're coming into ecosystem-based solutions, that these solutions don't only deliver adaptation benefits, but they also deliver mitigation, biodiversity, and livelihood benefits. So that gives us a little bit more of an opportunity to raise funds for these solutions. And you all probably all familiar that it's been fairly difficult to get funding at scale for adaptation. And we should, in my view, take ruthlessly also advantage of finding the finances on the mitigation side as well as the biodiversity side. From UNEP's point of view, we're heavily focused on the intergovernmental collaboration around mountains. And we, for example, host the Secretariat for the Carpathian Convention, and we work also closely with the Secretariat of the Alpine Convention, so considering as our sisters and brothers. In terms of those solutions that I mentioned, there are quite a number of good solutions and examples already. And in the Adaptation at Altitude program that has been financed by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, we have a solutions portal where we have compiled of these solutions, and I invite you to go and have a look at those solutions. In terms of adaptation here at the COP, been following kind of adaptation for quite a number of years now. I have not heard or seen this type of attention to adaptation and ecosystem-based solutions as we have heard here. So we're definitely getting the traction, at least in the speeches and in the negotiations halls. We still have quite a long way to go, however, with those finance. So Nanki, I'm going to stop there. I know we have 7 speakers, so we have quite a path ahead of us. The floor is back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicholas. I'd next like to invite Ms. Alenka Smerkold, who is the Secretary General of the Alpine Convention. Alenka was formerly the Minister for European Cohesion Policy and also for Finance in Slovenia, and has also had a career in banking. So Alenka is joining us virtually. Welcome, Alenka.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from Innsbruck, Austria. And Ankin, thank you for the word. I'm very pleased that we were able to put this high-level event together. I will just say a few introductory words on the experience of the Alps in tackling climate change at transnational level. The Alpine Convention is an international treaty signed by the 8 Alpine countries and the European Union with the aim of protecting the Alps and further sustainable development. Just 2 days ago, we celebrated the 30th jubilee of the signing of the convention. The Alps, like other mountain regions, are disproportionately affected by climate change. And as a vibrant region at the heart of Europe, they also have a responsibility in reducing their carbon footprint. Since 2017, the Alpine Convention's climate action has been bundled by the Alpine Climate Board, whose chair, Helmut Chojewski, will say more in the following panel discussion. Climate action with the Alpine Convention is complementing international, national, and regional strategies by addressing the specificity of the Alps. This is expressed in 4 general principles: rooting all actions in the Alpine cultural heritage and environment, integrating both adaptation and mitigation aspects in most measures, showcasing transnational, intersectoral, and multi-level cooperation, generating co-benefits with sectoral policies and other cross-cutting topics such as demography or green economy. The Alpine Climate Board is monitoring climate action in the Alps and took stock of over 150 initiatives and projects over recent years. I will outline 3 inspiring examples. First, I wish to point to the work done by the Alpine Convention's Working Group on Natural Hazards, which has identified governance as an essential pillar of natural hazard risk management. We published a report 2 years ago with recommendations as well as good practices from all Alpine countries on how they work with inhabitants, firefighters, and other stakeholders. The working group also organized an international exhibition of models and other risk communication tools. On a related topic, I wish to mention in passing that nowadays not only floods but also water scarcity and droughts have become a major issue in the Alps, although Alps are traditionally referred to as the water tower of Europe. My second example is in the area of biodiversity. Indeed, with temperature elevation, high-altitude habitats are shrinking. Protected areas are even less than before able to secure on their own the preservation of mountain biodiversity. Ecological corridors are needed, as already stated in our Protocol on Nature Protection. Albionet 2030 is a recent project of the Alpine Network of Protected Areas, Alparc, which is an active observer of the Alpine Convention, together with other partners, including a Hunters Federation. In this project, a mapping of connectivity in the Alps and their periphery was carried out. And this evidence that there is a pressing need to act in the main valleys and the foothills of the Alps to prevent protected areas from becoming isolated and unable to sustain healthy populations of the fauna and flora species. New and stronger protected areas may also be needed. A well-operating ecological network is valuable for its own sake, but also essential to maintain the related ecosystem services. Finally, I wish to mention the Alpine Convention's work in the field of soil protection. This is an area where climate change adaptation and mitigation are intertwined. Soils in mountain areas are a scarce resource, submitted to conflicting land use pressure. Healthy soils provide retention areas for flood management and help avoid heat island effects in settlement areas. In parallel, the Alps harbor many peatland, moorland, and wetland areas which can potentially sequestrate a lot of carbon, but are often not in a very good state and require restoration. Soil protection, like climate action, is very much cross-sectoral, as the quantity and quality of soils depend, for instance, on spatial planning and agriculture policies. The Alpine Convention set up a working group on soil protection 3 years ago, which is currently working on a long-term action plan. First results have been achieved, inter alia, in the areas of monitoring alpine soils and public awareness raising. I will conclude with reinforcing this last aspect. Indeed, we have to join forces to raise awareness on the need for climate action targeted to the mountains. I thank you for the exchange today, and I'm very glad that we can count on each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for setting the scene for this event. And now I'd like to move us on to the high level segment. And I am going to invite our speakers to join us on the podium. So while my colleagues are setting up the 4 chairs, we have 5 speakers, 1 joining virtually. And each of our speakers are regional, they really represent, they are leaders for transboundary regional governance in their respective mountain region. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel of high-level speakers now. From the Andes, we have Peru, which acts as the current coordinator of the Regional Andean Mountain Initiative, with governmental representation from 7 Andean countries: Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela. It has helped establish working groups aiming at increasing regional resilience towards climate change. Peru and the Andean Mountain Initiative is represented here today by His Excellency, Mr. Alfredo Mamani, who was appointed Deputy Minister for Strategic Development of Natural Resources, Ministry of Environment, Peru in August 2021. Welcome, sir. From the Carpathians, we have Poland, who currently holds the presidency of the Carpathian Convention, leading the work on protection and sustainable development of the Carpathian Mountain region, including strengthening regional cooperation on better adaptation to climate change and its impacts. Poland is represented by Lucas Rate, Director of Nature Conservation, Ministry of Climate Change and Environment in Poland, and will be joining us virtually. Welcome. We are then followed by Nepal, which has always been a strong supporter of the mountain agenda and is the host government for the for ICIMOD, which is an intergovernmental organization. And representing Nepal, we have Dr. Radha Wagle, who is the Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Forests and Environment, Nepal. She is also Nepal's UNFCCC focal point and serves as a high-level task force member under the HKH call to action. She's also one of the lead negotiators who's trying to get cryosphere onto the agenda here in the negotiations. So welcome, Radha. We are also joined by our Director General from ICIMOD, which is a regional intergovernmental organization and is working very hard to work with the power of 8 countries to scale up investment in mountain-specific climate change priorities. We are being joined by our Director General, Dr. Pema Gyamcho. Welcome, Pema. And finally, but not least, from the Alps, we are being joined by Austria, who hosts the Secretary of the Alpine Convention in the Alpine city of Innsbruck and holds the chair of the Alpine Climate Board of the Alpine Convention. From Austria, we are being joined by Mr. Helmut Hoeski. He is the current chair of the Alpine Climate Board and director at the Federal Ministry for Climate Action, Government of Austria. Welcome to you as well. And I believe you need to leave early since we are running a bit late. So this is a facilitated discussion. As you know, we'll be focusing on 2 questions. One is how, if you have an example from your country of how you've integrated climate action into your national policies or into regional governance mechanisms. And the second one would be focusing on any examples of how you've successfully addressed transboundary climate risks through regional cooperation. So Helmut, I will start off with you. If you'd like to, you're welcome to answer both, but to the rest, I'll request you to first answer the first question and then we'll move to the next one.
Sure. Thank you, Nanki, for I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Austrian Ministry for Climate Action, as well as the chair of the Alpine Climate Board, as Alenka has already introduced myself, and Nanki as well. And it's a pleasure for me to be here at this side event organized together with ICIMOD, with UNEP, and with the Alpine Convention, with the Permanent Secretariat. Examples. I would like to start with and adding on what Niklas started off. Adaptation, and I can confirm this, is definitely very much more important than before here, not only regarding finance, but it's evident that the impacts of the climate crisis increase. So I stop here. Okay, I try to continue. And so mitigation was at the beginning of our process the main issue, but now it's adaptation is equally important, and it's the second column of all our doing here. If I would like to present you some examples, well, I would start off with some important product of the Alpine Climate Board. It's the Alpine Climate Target System 2050, which looks equally on mitigation. So we are looking for a climate neutral Alps in 2050, but also on climate resilient Alps in 2050. So we are looking on both sides, mitigation and adaptation, and they have to go hand in hand. We have 10 sectors where we have um, targets defined, and now we are under the work of implementing these targets with defined pathways, what we do within the next 5 to 10 years. And I have some examples from different countries. One example from Italy, where there is a project called Transfoodmation. It's derived from transformation. It's Transfoodmation, where Italy tries to bring together individuals to take part in a process where we have to change from or to change to more sustainable and resilient food systems. So this helps not only the Alpine region, but it's a global problem, and this is something which is definitely key. Another example comes from Switzerland, the Forum 21, where it's also related to food, where or Switzerland looks at the disruption and rebound of territorialized food systems, and this is definitely also important because Switzerland tries to test the resilience of communities and food producers, and has a direct impact, of course, as an adaptation measure. And finally, one proposal from Austria, my home country. We have um, designed a program where we um, support regions, so communities, but not only a single community, but regions. They have to join forces to form climate adaptation model regions. We had this before for energy and climate, and now we derived or expanded this to adaptation, which is a very important input. And this is extremely well taken by the Austrian communities. And this is a program we are really proud of. This is something we would also see as an example. And the second question on the transboundary issue, I think the work of the Alpine Climate Board is a good example. We are working together closely with the Carpathian Convention, but we are also pleased to work with the Andes, with the Himalayan region, with other mountainous region. I joined workshops recently with the Andes countries where we told our approach. So it's important to exchange information, to exchange our experience with those of my colleagues on the podium from the other mountainous regions in the world, because we all share the same problem. Climate change is a serious impact and it will grow. So let's join forces. Let's um, interchange our experiences to find better solutions how we could cope with the impacts of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Helmut. I'll give you time to put on your mask, so I won't take off mine. Next, I'd like to invite Your Excellency, Mr. Mamani, to share your experiences on how Peru has integrated adaptation into national plans, and also your thoughts about addressing transboundary climate shocks.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, let me thank you, UNEP, Government of Austria, and ICIMOD for organizing this event, and for this invitation to this meeting that allows us to highlight the importance of mountain ecosystems, the need for adaptation to climate change, and the progress we have done in our countries for protecting these areas is a huge importance. In Peru, mountains ecosystem cover more than 40% of the national territory and are home of at the least the third of the population, around 10 million people. We are blessed with a territory that has more than 71% of the world's tropical glaciers. However, in the last 50 years, we have lost most of the 50% of our glaciers, and many ecosystems are already altering their functions and disappearing. Glaciers retreat, reduce solid water reserves, and gives rise to glacial lakes. These lakes then become a short to mid-term source of water, representing a source of hazards for the population, for the reduction of the water resource, and possible mass movements. These major climate hazards that are projected to become more intensive in Peru will have implication of risk level exacerbated by poverty and inequity, which add to the vulnerability condition existing in the Andean ecosystem and population. Therefore, the Peruvian government is committed to protecting this ecosystem and preserving their balance in line our action climate commitment. We have at this objective formulated 92 adaptation measures as part of our NDC assumed by Peru. From those, three are already directly related to reduce the risk associated with glacier retreat. That means implementation of early warning system for floods, landslides, and other glacier hazards. Implementation of interventions related to planting and harvesting of water or capture of water. For water security with an emphasis on agriculture. Implementation of information services to planning in the multi-sectoral management of water resources in vulnerable watersheds on a climate change. In addition, Peru is formulating the national policy on glaciers and mountain ecosystem to establish a strategic orientation, framework, and actions on climate change adaptation and disaster and risk management in mountain areas. These experiences are looking for reducing risk in mountains ecosystem and its services. Moreover, it's relevant to continue promoting efforts with and for a natural as an assets for the development of our countries more now than ever. Well, some experiences there. Well, I was born in the mountains and I live in the mountains. And as you know, the temperature was less than 0 degrees, but we don't know how to live because our animals are our friendly partnership. And in the also I live in the transboundary basin, Titicaca Lake, which is the highest Titicaca. It is Titicaca Lake in the world. It's 3,810 meters above the sea level. And you know, our Earth is bigger than the whole was born in this around the sea. Okay, but the oxygen is not enough there. That is why. And we currently agree with Bolivia, which is another country, and how we manage this kind of mountains. We share the water. It's so difficult. It's so difficult because one of them says, no, this mountain is our and the water is our, but it's not the reality. And we are negotiating. That's the big issue, but we have here an authority, lake authority, with an example in the world how we share this kind of ecosystems. Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Excellency. I think you must be well adapted out here. We are having quite a difficult time with oxygen in our masks. So I hope you're having an easier time. With that, I'd like to move to the Andes. which is being represented here by Peru. I'd like to move to the Carpathians, which is being represented by Poland. And Poland currently holds the presidency of the Carpathian Convention, leading the work on protection and sustainable development of the Carpathian mountain region, including strengthening regional cooperation on better adaptation to climate change and its impacts. Poland is being represented by Lucas Rate, the Director of Nature Conservation, Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. Lucas, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I hope you see and hear me well. Yes, I hope so. Thank you. Please accept the warm welcome from Warsaw, from the lowest mountains in this group, because the Carpathians are much lower than the Alps and Himalayas themselves. But we are very happy we are here and could share with our experience with you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here and present in this panel both Poland and Carpathian Convention. It must be underlined that Poland has had the honor to hold the presidency in this convention since November 2020. In this introductory remark, I would like to share with you the Carpathian experience concerning cooperation on the adaptation to climate change. Let me just mention that the Carpathian Convention was adopted and signed by 7 parties: Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Romania, Serbia, Slovak Republic, and Ukraine in May 2003 in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. It provides a transnational framework for cooperation and multi-sectoral policy integration, an open forum for participation by stakeholders and the public, and a platform for developing and implementing transnational strategies, programs, and projects for protection and sustainable development of the region. The Carpathians are one of the most extensive mountain ranges in Europe, stretching across Central and Eastern Europe. A mountain range like this encompasses transboundary systems, which play a critical role for providing essential goods and services, including water supply, biodiversity, leisure, and landscape, and are important income sources for communities through agriculture, tourism, health, and the use of natural resources. As we are all perfectly aware, mountains are particularly vulnerable to climate change, and the rate of this problem has dramatically increased in recent decades. This is why the parties to the Carpathian Convention had decided to add climate change to the list of its priorities. COP5 that met in Hungary 4 years ago adopted an amendment to the Carpathian Convention, the new Article 12 bis on climate change, in order to emphasize the importance of the climate change issues in the region. Article 12 bis on climate change addresses both climate change mitigation and adaptation. It requests parties to pursue policies aiming at climate change mitigation in all sectors relevant to the Convention, as well as policies aiming at climate change adaptation. For adaptation, it highlights that parties to the Convention shall, inter alia, promote transnational cooperation, foster local adaptation planning processes, and the implementation of actions, especially in the most vulnerable areas and sectors. This article also addresses disaster risk reduction by particularly promoting to take integrated measures for risk reduction, especially of extreme weather events. 3 years later, in November 2020, COP6 adopted the long-term vision 2030 towards combating climate change in the Carpathians, defining strategic objectives and related targets for implementing Article 12 bis, and acknowledged the elaboration of the corresponding implementation framework 2030. The action plan accompanying the long-term vision towards combating climate change in the Carpathians sets our out concrete activities and milestones for the Carpathian Convention Working Group on climate change with regard to achieving the strategic objectives and related targets of the vision. As you perfectly know, one of the most important tasks in mountains is water. In Carpathian, we have no glaciers, but we have a similar problem with water. So the prevention and all activities for retention of the water are extremely important. So one of our examples and one of our activities is the action toward the water retention. In Poland, state forests are now in the course of the project adaptation of forests and forests to climate change by low retention and counteracting water erosion in mountain areas. It's planned for 2016 to 2022 with a budget of around 60 million euro. And within the 47 forest districts located in the Carpathians, for the Poland sites, of course, we are going to retain about 400,000 cubic meters of water. Of course, the different countries have different systems of retention, different systems for forestry, and one of the main targets and aims for such convention as the Carpathian Convention is to promote, to share the experience, and to work together for such a project and for such activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucas. That was very clear, and we can see you very clearly as well. You do look like you're part of this panel sitting here. So thank you for joining remotely. With that, we've been with the Alps, the Carpathians, the Andes, and I'd now like to move back to the Hindu Kush Himalaya region and invite Dr. Radha Wagle. Rather, the questions are the same, but for you with a little specific focus. For those of you who know Radha, she's, other than being a negotiator that's flying the mountain flag high in the negotiations, she is also a champion for gender and social inclusion. So Radha, if you could please focus on some of the great work that you're doing to integrate these issues into climate plans and into regional cooperation, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Nanki. First of all, I would like to thank ICIMOD for this opportunity. Honorable Minister from Peru and Director of ICIMOD, and all the participants here who presented in front of me and who is in virtual setting. And first of all, I would like to acknowledge that today is the Gender Day in COP26. If I don't talk about gender, then it will be unfair. Then happy Gender Day to all the participants here. And I wish that we can understand the differential impact of climate change based on gender and intersectionality within the gender and act accordingly. And I hope this day motivates us to see the climate change issue from the perspective of gender justice. And while we talk about the impact of climate change in Nepal, I think women, not only in Nepal, but in most of the developing world, I think women, children, youth, and marginalized communities, such as the Dalits in our country, they are so-called untouchable, and some indigenous people and peoples who live in the poverty, they are impacted hard by the climate change, and they are one who are the vulnerable. They are being more vulnerable in future if the climate change is going like this, if the scenario is increasing like this, if we could not stop it in the 1.5 degree limit. Even the 1.5 degree degree limitation is detrimental for us in the mountainous region, and the impact is severe for the women and children and the other marginalized group. And while we prepare our policies and while we design any program and project and implement them in the field, we need to look it from the perspective of gender and how they are differentially impacted and how we can address that particular issues which has been impacting them. And moreover, we need to bring their concern and their interest and need and to see and better to see them as a agent of change and as a means of adaptation rather than seeing them as a vulnerable group of the climate change. And here I would like to tell about some of the national policies and plans programs we have been adopting so far, and we have incorporated gender perspective in those policies. For example, we have national climate change policy, and that has clearly acknowledged that the differential impact of climate change among different gender and different intersectionalities. And there are altogether 18 thematic areas under the climate change policies, and one of them is gender, livelihood, and governance. And while we conducted our vulnerability risk analysis to prepare our national adaptation plan, we have conducted altogether 9 vulnerability risk analysis and produced 9 reports, and out of them 1 is dedicated to gender. And here I would like to emphasize that whatever we did in the name of adaptation and gender in our country, linking the gender and adaptation, we did that for the sake of mountain and for the sake of mountainous people. I think this is the mutual relationship between people and the land and all the resources that is on the that is on our land. And similarly, we have. I would like to share one experience that I think that is the one of the best example from Nepal in adaptation theme. For example, we have community-based forest management practice. I think that is the whole mosaic of adaptation practice. That is not only following the forestry related activities, but they are the people who are involved in community forest management. They are also doing agricultural adaptation, they are also doing community development activities, they are also doing so many other land management activities within their territory and within their vicinity. And that is also the community forest management is the tool for women empowerment. It is the process for women empowerment and also the outcome for women empowerment. We have the policy that 50% of women should be represented in the community forest management user committee, and that has been followed by user committees, and even in the major portfolios like chairman and the secretary, there must be 1 woman. And similarly, other intersectionalities like indigenous communities, they are also considered there. And now we have some dedicated policies for gender inclusion in forestry sector as well as in different climate change area. For example, we have formulated one gender and climate change strategy and implementation plan, and we are going to implement this, and we have several action plan that are in different thematic area of climate change. For example, in health, agriculture, forestry, urban settlement, so many areas has been covered by this policy. And we have dedicated policy for gender and social inclusion in the forestry sector. And I think now what I need to acknowledge here is whatever is done in the name of adaptation, that is done by the local women. That women are leading those adaptation schemes, because most of the male, they are migrated to outside the country due to the poverty and other uh, employment related reasons, and now the whole household responsibility is in women's head, and that's why that is completely feminization of adaptation activities. I would like to reiterate here, and I think we need to give them a big applaud for their dedication to conserve our nature and to conserve our mountains. And I would like to stop here, and if you come back again, and maybe I can add some more and perspective from youths as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Radha, and thank you for being such a strong voice for women, especially women from the local communities. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Pema to give his remarks on good examples or thoughts on regional collaboration as well.
Thank you very much, Nanki. It was very, very interesting listening to the voices from the Alps, the Andes, and also the Carpathian, and of course from the host nation of ICIMOD, Nepal. So I would like to just pick up from where Radha left. I think migration is a key issue. I think that is the oldest form of adaptation. If it is cold, where do you move to? You go to hotter places, warmer places. If it is too hot, you move to colder places. If there is danger, you run away from it to a safer place. I think adaptation is that. But the question is, there are too many places where people have to run away from now. If you look at the Hindu Kush Himalayas, people are running away from the mountains to avoid GLOF, for example, glacial lake outburst flood. People are running up from the coastal areas to avoid cyclones, windstorms, and other disasters. So where do they go? In the mid hills, we are already having our own share of disasters like flash floods, drought. So I think this is the question that we have to ask. We have seen very good examples, and I think this is, fertile ground for sharing experiences, for cross learning between our mountain regions. While geographically we are apart, I think the issues that we are hearing are similar, and the solutions we need to find together. Share experience, share learnings, share good practices, share innovations. We have seen now, if there is a flood, danger from a flash flood or from a glacial lake outburst flood, what do? We have to be prepared for it. That is why we have seen examples of community-based flood early warning system. This is very important. It will save lives. And that is something that we can share across region is very much needed. We cannot run away and run very far. And again, relating to Radha's presentation, I think women and children are most vulnerable. So we have to take into account when we develop flood response mechanisms that these vulnerable groups are taken into account. So what do we do when there is shortage of water? It's running out. We have heard it over and over again. The glaciers are melting very fast and disappearing. So in that event, the springs are drying up, the streams are drying up. So you have seen examples of the ice stupa, the artificial glacier from Ladakh in India. I don't know whether we can recreate that in other places, but it is worth trying. I think it offers a solution to the shortage of water that our mountain regions are facing. Now, livelihoods, smart agriculture, that's what we are all talking about. But what do we mean by smart agriculture? Perhaps we need to now relook at lost species of crops, crops that were adapted to high altitude but were replaced by more commercial high yielding varieties and species. Those crops were adapted there. We need to look at that from the species point of view. There may be room for us to exchange germplasm, exchange crops, seeds, and varieties that are much more adapted. We need to look at how we can replace chemical fertilizers that have huge carbon footprint with locally available organic form of soil nutrition. We have heard from the Alps. The soil conservation, soil management is a key issue, and that is something we need to take forward. Now, in ICIMOD, we are also looking at several of these adaptation measures, and we will be very happy to share with our colleagues from across the other mountain regions. I think we need to keep in touch. We need to network closely, and I think this is a very good beginning. It's not that we haven't met in the past; we have met in the past, but we need to now go forward in a more formal, organized manner to exchange our experiences. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So much, Pema, and thank you to all the speakers. We are running 15 minutes late, so in an attempt to wrap up, I was asked to think of what we've heard, and I've jotted down 5 points. The first one is that climate change does impact mountain regions hard. The second one is that we really need to understand these impacts from a more gender and social inclusion perspective. The third one is that adaptation is essential, and adaptation is happening. We've heard some great examples, and I think we're all very, very happy to hear that it's being given equal importance at this COP. The fourth point I noted was that local communities are the drivers of adaptation actions. They are the agents of adaptation action. And to support that action at the local level, regional cooperation plays an essential role. We've heard some great examples of learning, sharing evidence, and also examples of how you can actually do that through examples like these conventions and regional initiatives. So with that, I'd like to thank all our speakers at the high-level session and our first session. And in terms of next steps, just emphasize the importance of working together. And in this regard, the Swiss-funded Adaptation at Altitude program will convene an interregional action learning workshops, Mountain Connect, in June 2022 in Vienna, Austria, for mountain governance stakeholders from the Andes, South Caucasus, East Africa, HKH to exchange in an interactive format, as well as share experience from the Alpine Convention and the Carpathian Convention. We look forward to continuing this discussion, and I shall now hand over to the second part of this session to my more youthful colleague, where we bring in young voices and hopefully some great music. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Nanki. Am I audible? All right. Thank you, Nanki. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. And this is going to be a sort of a final session of the day, formal session of the day. After this session, we'll also have a informal networking session where we'll be launching we'll be screening a film. It's about an hour on sustainable summits. So we'd want you to also stay after that, after this session ends as well. But so in this session, what we're gonna do is, before we invite the youth representatives that we have from different regions, I wanted you all to listen to one song that we've just created, called HKH Calling. So representing the the call of the mountains. So because I think we're running a bit late, so we'll just ask my colleagues Heidi to actually start playing the song, and then we'll start the discussion with our colleagues shortly.
time to waste. Oh, let's join our hearts. The future depends on us. There's no more time to wait. We should protect our land. Oh, come take our hands. We'll show you a wonderland. Cradle of culture and arts, Hindu Kush Himalaya. The home to millions of people of many nations and tribes. The vibrant pulse of the planet, the source of endless life. Oh, come take our hands, we'll show you a wonderland. Cradle of culture and arts, Hindu Kush Himalaya.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the music, and I saw actually some of the people shaking their heads. So I thought, the music really, hit their mind. So just briefly giving a little bit of introduction of that song. This is actually a brainchild of our, the idea behind this song is from our Director General, Dr. Pema Jamso, who actually believes in the power of music, power of engaging youth, and engaging them to raise the concerns of the the mountains and the people around that. So we're really thankful for Dr. Pema for believing for us in actually making that project. So now, without further ado, what I'll do is I'll invite the youth representatives that have come from different regions. To start with, we have Bindu Bhandari from Nepal, representing HKH region. She's actually an why don't you come? Yeah, she's actually an ICIMOD alumnus itself. So and one of our youth forum alumnus. So she has worked with ICIMOD before and helped with our communications. Bindu has been actively participating in UN climate change conferences, COP 21, 22nd, 25, and this is probably your fourth conference. And she's a sevening scholar and holds a master's degree in climate change science and policy from the University of Bristol in UK. So very glad to have you here, Bindu. Now, representing the other region, we have Mr. Antonio Ferraris, if I may call you on the stage. He is a student of Environmental and Natural Resource Management at the University of Life Sciences in Vienna. At COP 26, he is an Austrian senior youth delegate following the topic area of adaptation here in Glasgow. And is highly devoted to nature protection, especially mountainous areas where he spends most of his spare time. Glad to have you here, Antonio. And last but not the least, we have someone from the Andes as well. So, from Peru. She's Karen here, and she actually belongs to the indigenous peoples, Asaninka tribe. And she is a youth representative to one of the organizations based in Peru. It's called ONAMIA, and she's doing her studies in international relations now. And I had the pleasure of sharing stage with her last week in one event where she talked about the importance of youth engagement and youth engagement for sharing profiling mountain agenda in the global forum. So I know we're running a bit late. So what I'll do is, instead of asking too many questions, I'll give you floor one by one, because I know, Bindu, you have to run for a meeting shortly. So if you could just shortly touch upon your experience so far, and also talk a bit about the work that you're currently doing and the product that you've developed, and also a bit of few pointers on your experience of engaging as a youth in these COP conferences, and probably your sort of advice to more younger colleagues who would want to venture in this journey. So I'll give you first.
Thank you so much for having me. Sorry. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy and honored to share the floor here with two other friends. So I'm Bindu Bandari and I'm from Nepal. In the last 8 years, I have been working actively in youth campaigning, but now I'm more into science and policy side. So currently I work with this organization called Climate Interactive as their outreach and engagement manager. And we do have interactive climate tools that we use to engage people in a meaningful climate conversation. And throughout my journey in over these 8 years, what I have realized is, well, let me quote someone who kind of synthesizes everything that I want to say. So one of our advisors is Professor John Easterman from MIT, from the MIT. And what Professor John Easterman found in one of his research is that research shows that showing people research doesn't work. So we have a lot of research papers coming every year, every month, but how to kind of synthesize all that research and translate it into something that is accessible for people with all kind of academic and intellectual background to grab on. So that is what we try to do on at Climate Interactive. That's what I'm trying to do with the simulators, which are accessible but also free for anyone to use, and it's really fun to play with. You can have it as workshop, but you can also play it in the role-playing game format. So over the years, again, coming back to what I have been doing, I have been trying to make climate education and especially climate science accessible to people, especially in the global south. And in that attempt, my focus is how to bridge the gap between what the science is telling us and where we are headed with our advocacy. How to kind of bridge that gap and make young people's voice not just heard in this crowd, but also really have a stake at the decision-making process. And for that, we need, of course, science. Science must be at the heart of all those work that we do. As someone who has studied climate change science and policy, I really see the gap between what the research is saying and what we are doing. So to avoid that disconnect, I think it's really important that this kind of forums, and we have sustainable plans for youth groups to build their capacity in taking on science, but also kind of relating and integrating it to the advocacy. And I recently joined this pre-COP26 event, which was hosted by the Ministry for Ecological Transition in Italy. And we produced what we call Youth for Climate Manifesto. It's a 44-page document, which is now available online in 6 UN languages. So I work specifically in the education theme, and our demands are loud and clear. Of course, we want meaningful youth participation. We don't want to be tokenized for sure, which we have seen for long. And we also need funding. Often we talk about we want youth people, we just keep on doing again, blah, blah, blah. But what we need is the forum that actually funds people to build their capacity and fund not just the young people, but also people in power and position to build their capacity so that they can include youth. Because not always, maybe people in decision-making power have their good intent to include people like us in the process, but they may not know how of how to do that. So building capacity of people in power and position, but also of youth, so that there is no disconnect between these two groups. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, right? We want climate justice, we want equitable policies, we want to get down that temperature curve to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So I won't take long, but just to say that it's high time that we have meaningful participation of young people, not just in the advocacy side, not just as a token, not just as an accessory to photo ops, but to really involve as stakeholders, as partners, not just as beneficiaries. With that, I would like to stop over here, and thank you again for having me. And my apologies that I had a commitment. I need to be at another meeting, but so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Bindu. It's always good to listen to you, and we're sorry that you need to leave now, but we understand. So, but thank you for your time, and we'll be happy to talk with you more to learn more about the work that you're doing. So, yeah, thank you very much. But what I'll do now is one of our colleagues, one of our youth representative who is here, will speak in Spanish, and one of our colleague who is also from the same organization, ONAMIAP, is Harlem, who is here. I would want her to actually, maybe we can actually sit there itself. All right. that's also fine. But before that, I wanted to go to Antonio for some time. Uh, Antonio, I heard that you're listening. Yeah, all right. I heard that this is the second COP that you're attending, right? Uh, and you have been very active in this group, Climates Austria, where you've been engaging with youth in Austria and beyond to share knowledge about climate crisis, and also do advocacy work with different stakeholders and to bring them together. Yeah, you in such a young age. So, what is your opinion on the role of young people in promoting climate and adaptation action? And what do you think actually youth can really achieve? If you could share some experiences on that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, to begin, I want to give a small aspect on what Climates Austria is actually doing. So we have 4 big projects. The first one is organizing the local conference of youth. It brings together about 300 people from all Austria, young people who are talking about the climate crisis there. Then the second one is capacity building in schools. The third one is a blog and a portal where young climate journalists can develop themselves. And the fourth program is the youth delegation program that is in cooperation with a climate ministry. And I think those 4 programs pretty much underline what youth is able to do. The first one is awareness raising. Many people, and also those in Austria who will be very affected of the climate crisis in mountainous regions, are still not aware of what is actually going on. And it is our role as those who know about it to use, for example, the media attention we have today. We have a big media attention on young people that is surprising and very important. And we can use this wisely just to raise for more ambition and to call for more ambition, because it's going to be crucial. And I know in Europe, we're still focusing a lot on mitigation, but our role is also to talk about adaptation. The second point I want to share is this action on the ground. We young people still have a lot of time besides school. It sounds weird, but we probably have our holidays and so on. We have a lot of mountain projects in Austria where, for example, young people are reforesting and developing resilient forests. I think this is a part that is often left apart in discussions as well. And the third point, and this is probably the most important, is that we start getting politically active, that we start being integrated and institutionalized in forums. And that's also a bit what Bindu said. And yeah, I think, for example, this youth delegation program is extremely important because we're just having to share our voices. We are the most affected of the climate crisis in the future. And it's crucial that our voices are heard and not old people who probably won't live the climate crisis anymore decide upon our future.
Yeah, thank you, Antonio, for your remarks. I think some of those are quite in line with what Bindu had said. So I see the synchronous voice coming in from the youth from different regions. And if we have time later, I would also want to talk to you about your skiing experience. I heard you're a very good skier in Austria, so maybe I'll talk something about that. But now moving on to Karen, and our colleague would help translate. But I just wanted to ask you. I think now you've joined this COP, and what do you think? Why is it important for you to include women and young people from the indigenous groups in decision-making process when it comes to climate change? So if you could just shed some light on that.
Karen, ¿por qué crees que es importante que los jóvenes y en especial los jóvenes de los pueblos indígenas, sean parte de estos espacios de negociación.
Ari Kametsatake, estoy muy contenta por este espacio, por la apertura. Estoy muy agradecida porque nuestra mirada de los pueblos indígenas tiene que ser intergeneracional, porque nuestros ancestros y ancestras, para cualquier cambio o cualquier forma de adaptación del cambio climático, ellos con sus sabios consejos, nos han pasado en generación. Por eso, hoy estamos aquí con la organización ONAMIAP, que también tiene ese gran desafío, ese reto de transmitir a los jóvenes y a los adolescentes de las futuras generaciones indígenas para estar atenta a cualquier forma de mejorar, de preservar nuestras montañas, preservar nuestros glaciares. Nosotros somos una organización de Perú, que es una organización de mujeres indígenas andinas y amazónicas del Perú, que es lo que pasa en los Andes, repercute en la Amazonía. Es como un todo. Por eso el cambio climático nos ha afectado de manera integral en nuestro territorio.
Okay, bear with me, please. I'm not, if anyone is listening to this in Spanish, si están escuchando esto en español, no soy traductora oficial, así que voy a intentar transmitirles lo que Karen ha dicho ahora. Sorry, and I'm going to try to translate this as best as I can because I'm not a professional translator. So she's saying that she's happy to be here, that Indigenous people's perspectives has to be intergenerational, and it is intergenerational because their knowledge comes from their ancestors, and the youth needs to be in these kind of places as well to share it and to let people know that that's how the Indigenous knowledge and ancestral knowledge is kept. She's mentioning as well that when we talk about mountains, when we talk about rivers, when we talk about all of these natural areas, we're actually talking about their territories, Indigenous people's territories, both in the Amazon and the Andes. And it's especially important, and she's from the Amazon, and it's especially important to make note that we cannot talk about the mountains and the Andes without also talking about the forests in the Amazon because they're highly interconnected.
Thank you for. All right.
Por eso, nosotras como mujeres indígenas y también las jóvenes, ¿qué estamos haciendo en nuestro territorio? Nosotras, desde la mirada intergeneracional, estamos protegiendo y estamos preservando los ojos de aguas. En las montañas es muy importante para nosotros, es como la sangre de la madre naturaleza, de la madre tierra, como le decimos, ¿no? Es por eso que nuestras sabias, nuestras hermanas mayores nos dan, pues, para respetar estos lugares sagrados, porque sin el agua dejamos nuestros territorios, abandonamos, y nuestra generación futura tiene que conectarse con ello para no dejar nuestro territorio. Además, también seguimos con esos diálogos de saberes, recuperando, compartiendo, para proteger, preservar nuestro territorio integral. Por eso hoy estamos aquí en la COP para acudir al llamado de la Madre Tierra, porque es necesario preservar y también recuperar nuestros principios ancestrales. Muchas gracias, y creo que la comunidad internacional tiene que saber que nosotros también, los pueblos y las mujeres indígenas, estamos preservando cómo adaptarnos al cambio climático desde nuestra tecnología, desde nuestros principios ancestrales, y eso tiene que reconocer la comunidad internacional, porque en nuestros países no se respeta el ecosistema, no se respeta las especies, y eso repercute a todos los pueblos indígenas y a las generaciones futuras. Pasonki, muchas gracias por este espacio de apertura a las mujeres de los pueblos indígenas.
So to end her intervention, she's saying that all young indigenous peoples are protecting their watersheds as a way of mitigating the impacts of climate change and also adapting. And that's what they do because it's part of their territory. Although in countries like Peru, their integral territory is entitled to them, they're still protecting it because it's their ancestral territory. And she highlights the importance that that has to protect mountains and all of the resources that we can find there. And something that it's important also for ONAMIAP as an organization is to talk about this, about the Mother Nature's rights as well. Mother Nature as a subject of rights. And that's something that ONAMIAP is also promoting back in Peru. And something that it's also important and she's mentioned is that women are adapting, indigenous peoples are adapting to climate change, and they've been doing so for a while because they do have their own science, their own technology, and the international community should know about this, should hear what they have to say, because unfortunately in our countries, these are not taken into consideration, and that can be seen in aspects such as what I've mentioned, which is not recognizing the integral territories of indigenous peoples. And she ended with this word, which is pasonki, which in the Ashaninka language means thank you very much.
So it's Pasonki. So Pasonki to you and my other youth colleague as well from Austria. Now, looking at the time, I think it's time, for the session to end. But, looking at the interest of some of the colleagues here, and the next session is also from us itself. It's a sort of a networking, informal networking session. So if you'd like to stay longer and interact with our youth colleagues and also with us, you're more than welcome to stay. But what I'll do is, before we move into the next session, I'll just request my colleague, from ICIMOD, our Deputy Director General, Isabella, if you could just take maybe a few minutes and share some of your observations and remarks on how we would want to engage with youth at ICIMOD also in the future.
Thank you. Is this the right one? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Sorry, it was a little bit unexpected. But firstly, just to say thank you for your powerful messages. I was really struck by your comment. I've just tweeted it actually about the fact that old people, including myself, should not be deciding about the future of the young. And I think that it probably needs both of us to be deciding the future, but I think that's a very powerful message. And my daughter is also very passionate about climate change and would love to have joined me here today. So she also made a similar quote the other day about how important it is for the young to be involved about the decisions of the future. So I hope we can make that happen. Also, I would like to see that we bring more young voices into the fora that we hold at the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. I think it's really important. I hope that we can do more on social media to bring in the voices of the young into our science discussions as well, and in terms of also identifying what is important about the science. So great to have you here. Thank you, Udayan, for organizing it and taking the initiative. Thanks.
Thank you, Isabella. I think my colleague Harlem would like to briefly translate the message of Karen.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe there's some other people. Hay más gente que habla español quizás, entonces sería bueno traducir. Lamentablemente en esta COP no tenemos traducciones en todos lados, entonces creo que es importante también señalar eso. I'm just saying that it's important to know that unfortunately during these COPs, translations, interpretation are not necessarily something that it's done, but it should be done because then we get to hear firsthand from people who are actually protecting this planet and its mountains and forests and rivers. Karen, lo que te decía la persona que ha pasado es que es importante, ¿no? Que no solamente sean los adultos, las personas que están decidiendo, ¿no? Sobre estos temas relacionados a cambio climático, sino también la juventud, ¿no? Y que es importante justamente tomar las experiencias que ustedes tienen para que también sea parte de las medidas que se están tomando, ¿no? Y hablaba también de lo importante que es implementar esto a nivel de los medios, de los aplicativos y otras plataformas sociales también.
Thank you, Harlem, and thank you to my youth colleagues. If you and thank you very much for your time. But before we close, I also have a colleague who has actually really helped shape this program today. So he's Ansgar Fellandra from UNEP Austria, who's been listening to us quietly for quite some time. So the screen is yours, Ansgar, and thank you very much for your support in shaping up this program from the very beginning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Udayan. I will keep it very short. So my name is Ansgar Fellendorf. I work in the Global Mountain Team at UNEP, at the UN Environment Program. And this is also reflecting the hybrid character of this COP26 event. So we have focused on elevating adaptation action for mountain regions and especially affected communities in mountain regions. We heard strong young voices from leaders of the communities, and we heard of official representatives from the HKH region, the Andes, the Alps, and the Carpathians. A lot of words were said, and I will not try to summarize them here. I think Nanki did a good job, and also the Deputy Director General of ICIMOD. Just things that struck me were really, we need to adapt to climate change now. We need to increase adaptation funding. We need to use science. We need to work together within regions, with communities, and across regions. So I think at the UNEP Mountain Team, we are very motivated by this event to continue our work for mountain regions and between mountain regions. And I think what's only left is to thank the Federal Ministry of Climate Action of Austria, to thank the Alpine Convention, and to thank the Adaptation at Altitude program for reconvening, and especially thank you at ICIMOD for facilitating this event and hosting such a strong mountain day at COP. Thank you very much, and bye-bye also from hybrid space.
All right, thank you, Ansgar, very much. I wish you were here because we're now going to start our informal networking session, and I see on the corner we already have the drinks. So we'll miss you in this session. But now it has been a long day. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to also thank my colleagues who are here from ICIMOD, and also colleagues from ICCI, Heidi and Nick, who's been very, very supportive in running the whole program from the morning and till this time now. So what we'll do now is the next session is the informal networking session, but we'll be screening a film called Sustainable Summits. So over the drinks, you could spend time watching the film. It's about the different the challenges and the beauty of mountains of the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. So it's about an hour long. You might want to interact with colleagues and then be with us and have drinks and help yourselves. So with this, I thank you all, and thank you all for attending this program with us. Thank you very much.